and a tribal nation liaison in the DHCD Office of Outreach, Planning and Compliance. Over the past 17 years, Mona has managed state and federally funded projects and facilitates organizational development workshops covering topics such as facilitation, train the trainer, strategic planning, fund development, risk assessment and management, board governance, and leadership succession planning. She will be providing a presentation for us, facilitating difficult conversations successfully. Without further ado, I introduce you, Ramona.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Carlton. I appreciate that introduction. I just want to say I'm so happy to see everyone. I hope you all have enjoyed the conference like I have, and I've been asked to talk about co-conversations. And I think that's something that we've all experienced, particularly as facilitators. And I know that in listening to your comments, your questions and suggestions and so forth, you're all leaders, and no doubt you work in community development. So I'm sure most of you are facilitators in one way or another. And so, I just wanted to point out just some basic tips. Consider what I share with you as reminders. It's pretty nothing. I'm quite sure there's nothing profound I'll share, but I just want to remind you of maybe some facilitating tips you can use in your next facilitated meeting, whether it's in person or virtual. Sherry, can you advance the slide, please? Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so I just give a brief overview of what is a difficult conversation. We'll talk about some examples, and no matter whether it's a difficult conversation or any conversation, I'm mainly thinking about when the workplace. And, as we're communicating with our team, whether it's your project management team or your community group, I'm mainly thinking of workplace issues. But one of the things I always like to take with me are my oars, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Also, just kind of remind you of the facilitator's role and how we manage our conversations, and we manage it just by talking. And also, what happens when the conversation goes off the rails and makes a bad turn? I don't know if that's happened to any of you, but it's happened to me. And so one of the things I want to tell you as facilitators, if that happens, don't be so hard on yourself. Use compassion and empathy for yourself as you would your participants in your meeting. And then I would talk about discussion. As we know, we're wanting, whatever the issue is, we want the participants to reach a positive outcome. And so that's, just one of the things I always point out to participants and to other facilitators that I collaborate with. Next slide, please, Sherry. A difficult conversation. Hey, it's one that's really hard to initiate. It contains very sensitive information. It has to be conducted without heightened emotions, whether we're the facilitator or participant. We have to be very professional and not let our emotions get in the way of helping our group or moving the conversation to a more constructive situation or outcome. Next slide, Sherry. Thank you. So, and I'd like to hear from some of you all. Put it in your chat. If you facilitated a difficult conversation, what was the nature of the conversation? What was the issue? What worked well for you? What didn't work well? Here's some examples of some conversations, difficult conversations, based on the nature of our work sometimes. I've been hearing a lot during this session. You all have multiple grants. You have to meet deadlines. got budget challenges maybe, compliance issues that we may have to discuss. Respect, as we're communicating amongst one another, making sure that we're not judging each other, we're not blaming one another. One of the things I like to focus on is the issue and not the individuals whenever maybe a situation arises. Difficult conversation, you may have a great idea for a project, and the answer comes back no. How will you deal with that? How does your group deal with that? And also, we may have conflict between team members. So there's so many different conflicts that can arise on a daily basis. And oftentimes, the group may not be able to manage it or handle it, and they want to call you in as a facilitator. The next screen, a slide. So as a facilitator, what should you know before you're going into that meeting? Remember that excellent presentation that Sherry presented just a few minutes ago, and that's the importance of communication. And consider you're in a room and you've got all 5 of those generations in that room, and they all communicate differently. Also, if you're familiar with the DISC behavior assessment, those 4 behaviors, it would be good to get familiar with the dominant behavior, the supportive, the conscientious and influential behaviors, because we all have them, but they can also play a role in how they all communicate. So you want to try to pre-plan and speak to either the team leader, your executive director, the group leader. You want to get as much information as you can about the people who will be in the meeting. You want to know what's the issue, what's the key topic that we need to discuss. What do I need to know about that situation? What do I need to know about the organization? Any issues in the newspaper about the organization? You also just really want the facts. And then what kind of decisions need to be made? And so also, will we need additional meetings? How long can this meeting be? And so those are just some information, questions you want to ask yourself as you're planning your meeting. Next slide, please, Sharon. So whenever I'm facilitating a meeting, whether it's a difficult conversation or just helping a group plan a project or get their project back on track, whatever it may be, I always bring my oars with me. And so what do I mean by my oars? I mean, we always want to start with the outcome. What is it we need to achieve? What's the purpose of our meeting? What's the issue? What objectives do we need to accomplish? What results do we want? So we need an outcome. When we leave the meeting, we've achieved that outcome. That should be the goal. So how do we get to that outcome? Well, we always have to have an agenda. And in addition to the agenda, everyone has roles in the meeting. Everyone in this session, this conference has roles. Who sets the meeting up? Who plans it? Who's taking notes? Who's recording the meeting? Who's going to send those notes up? Who's going to set up the next meeting? So we all have roles that make our meetings more effective. And then we also have responsibilities to ensure that how we work together is going to result in achieving the outcome. I always encourage the groups that I work with to set their own ground rules. I call them shared responsibilities. But every meeting, a difficult meeting or not, we want ground rules to set the stage of how we'll work together. You know, we don't want folks to dominate the discussion. We want all people to participate. And so we all have responsibilities in making the sessions and meeting work. And then the scope, understanding the scope of the meeting. What are we empowered to do during that meeting time? And so always bring your oars, because your oars build trust in your group, your participants, and you know, they understand how they're going to communicate and relate to one another. And so you always want to bring your oars with you. Next slide.
Ramona, there was a question from Elizabeth. When you facilitate meetings, do you usually establish meeting ground rules?
I may establish some, but I really I ask the group, what ground rules would you all like to include? So that gives buy-in from the participants, and it kind of holds them accountable. If things go off the rail, we go back to those ground rules and say, remember, let's go back to our ground rules. We all said we would agree to do this, this, and that, and treat each other in this particular way. So you may start with a few, but I really like for our participants to share their thoughts on how they want to work together. So the facilitator's role, what's our role? We're there to help establish, again, the ground rules, the agenda. We're there to build trust. We're there to help people learn effective behavior. We want to focus on the issue. And even though folks in the room may be looking at a particular people or as the problem, causing the problem, but I like to focus on the issue and not the individual. The role of the facilitator, we're about the process, not necessarily the content. We like to help folks through the meeting conversation, help that process to success. So we remain neutral. We don't necessarily give our opinion about the issue. We may provide some guidance, but we give the group time to talk the issue out. And so don't get emotionally involved. Really, we don't need to be the spotlight. It's okay to step back and let the group just have a conversation and talk the things out. Oftentimes, there are issues, and the meeting was the first time the individuals came together, and they never sat in the room and looked at each other face to face to, share their ideas, share their thoughts and suggestions in a professional manner. So, move on, Sherry, please. So the facilitator is not someone, we don't get involved in the issue or the task that's being examined. We don't necessarily freely express our opinions. We really want to hear about the opinions and thoughts of the participants. We don't really have a stake in how the decisions are made. That's the group's responsibility. We don't have any decision-making authority. We can guide the decision making, but we don't make those decisions. That's why we're there. We want to move your group to decision making. We're not the judge, so we're just an unbiased person just trying to facilitate a process for getting to successful solutions. Next slide, please, Sherry. So difficult conversations, what do we do? Well, we talk. What do I mean by that mnemonic? People, think about how you frame the discussion, how you think about the conversation. We always want to have as facilitators a positive view. Don't think of it as a difficult conversation, but think about the positive outcome. What is it you want to achieve for your group? You want to help your group move move forward and leave the room feeling, having better attitudes toward one another, feeling confident about what we're going to do as when we leave the room. So think about how you frame the discussion. And always use clear, simple, neutral language. Refer to specific examples, again, to facts. And here, I want you to remember the introverts in the room, or the quiet folks like myself. I'm an introvert off the scale, so I'm listening and so forth. I probably won't say anything, but as a facilitator, I want to make sure that even the quiet people have the opportunity to express their thoughts. And that's where you use your flip chart or your sticky notes or having an exercise where everyone can share their thoughts. And then you want to listen. You want to, that's one of the ground rules. I think is to listen to everyone, not speak for the other person, say what you mean. Listen to what the other person is saying and hear their point of view, and really show that you care. And so, also, you want to keep focused on the issue and not the person, as I mentioned earlier. Next slide, please, Sherry. So, what do I do when things go off the rails? Well, I don't know if this ever happened, but you want to try to slow things down. You want to be transparent and manage the dilemma. If things go off the rail, you want to try to pull people back. If you need to refer back to your ground rules, if people are being rude, using bad language or whatever, getting angry, just try to refer back. Let's go back to ground rules. Let's go back to how we said we would communicate with one another. Stay rooted on the purpose. What's the issue? Stay focused on the issue at hand and still focused on what do we need to do to get to where we want to be, to get to that positive resolution. Ask lots of questions and encourage your participants to ask questions for clarity. And again, be neutral and be compassionate and empathetic to what other folks are thinking and saying and feeling. Next slide, please. So here's some questions of if a situation, a conversation they may go off on a tangent or it may go off the rails. As a facilitator, here's some questions that you could use to maybe help the group get unstuck and help them get back on track. Tell me more about why you feel that way or what led you to this point. Can you say that in another way? Or I'm wondering if some thoughts or feelings about what you've been hearing, is anyone else feeling the same way? Or I'd like to offer another point of view. I understand what you're saying. It's a great point, but here's another point. Have you thought about this? So these are just some other questions that you can use to get your conversation back on track. Next slide, please, Sherry. One thing that can be intimidating is silence. I don't know if you've ever experienced that. I have, and I kind of took it personal, but I eventually learned that silence is reflective. It's not a bad thing. It's your participants often just thinking about what may have happened, or thinking about how can I answer that question? What's the best way to respond to that question? It's reflective, and it's just not another opportunity to give participants time to reflect. If they want to share their thoughts, give them the opportunity to do so. And if not, you may you move on, and if necessary, you think you need to come back after you've discussed the issue more. You need to come back, ask the question again. Maybe you'll get more responses, but don't be afraid of silence. Share. You can move on. So, closing the discussion. I told you we would run through this quickly. Closing the discussion, as I mentioned earlier, as a facilitator, you want consensus. You'd like to have consensus among the participants. And what I mean by that is, we may not all agree on the decisions that are made, but can you support them? Can you live with that decision, and can you support it when you leave the room and you go back working with your group, working within your communities, working with your team? Also, be clear on what decisions are made. That's why you bring that flip chart to your meetings oftentimes, or you assign someone the role of being the note taker. But we want to be clear on the decisions that we've all agreed upon. And then what are the next steps? Where do we go from here? Do we need to meet again? Or is there a report that we should provide on this what we've determined or decided? What happens next? Do we need to plan a follow-up meeting? And one of the things I always do is I congratulate folks for having the courage to come together and address the difficult issue, whatever it may be, to celebrate your success. And if necessary, like what I heard Ms. Melissa say in her presentation, if you have additional questions, feel free to contact her. Feel free to contact your facilitator if you want one-on-one information. If it helps you, if it helps resolve the issues, do what's necessary. Use your facilitator, or use, now that you and your team members have gone and had the discussions, take the opportunity to open those lines of communication up. Understanding those different generational communication styles, maybe start applying those communication styles in your work. Next slide, please, Sherry. Okay, so I have a very brief exercise, and I've got two participants, two of my co-workers, and let me preface this by saying we like each other, we really like each other, and they like each other, okay? But I have a quick activity where we have a predictable response to an issue. We've got a not-so-great response but from the facilitator, and what's a better response that we could use if a participant may go off the rails? So I have my colleague here, Miss Amy O'Trell, and I also have is Miss Melissa with us as well?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Miss Melissa, thank you. So I'm going to just give a brief synopsis of the scenario. So here's the first scenario. During a community meeting that Melissa is facilitating, we have a know-it-all participant who continues to interrupt the meeting and believes she's the expert. So, is that you, Amy?
That's me. I am the know-it-all. I've been working in this field for 10 years. This area has lots of problems, and I know what the community needs. Everybody needs to vote my way on this project.
Excuse me, Miss Amy, that's your name, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Do not interrupt. Do not interrupt. We heard your comment previously. And so we don't need, don't interrupt, Miss Amy.
Okay, so that's a not so great reaction. So now let's see what a better response from the facilitator should be.
Miss Amy, you bring a wealth of information to the group, and we appreciate it so very much. Everyone, we do want to be mindful that as part of being a group today, that we're going to make comments or decisions as a group as a whole. But again, Miss Amy, we appreciate your information. And thank you. You've provided me with something that I didn't know. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to get your thoughts on that. In the interest of time, thank you, Amy and Melissa, but I have another scenario. And the second scenario is that Melissa is the designated person to facilitate today's Country House Rehab Project Management Team meeting. During the meeting, her team member, Ms. Amy, who is the lead, or she has the R on submitting reports to funders, she actually becomes angry.
Well, group, here we are. We have had deadlines for this project and we are not meeting them. Can someone give me an explanation and tell me what is going on? Why are we not meeting these deadlines? We know that they're important. We've set deadlines and we need to have some turnaround time. And this is for the importance of this project.
Okay. So what might be a better response? Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize, Amy.
Melissa, you have no idea how impossible it's been for me to get what I need from Paul over in data analysis. Every day he has some new excuse.
Miss Amy, I asked the question and it was an important question. So there's no need for you to get to have an attitude about it. You seem a little bit disrespectful. This is not a personal issue, Miss Amy.
Okay. So let's see what a better response might be from Ms. Melissa as she facilitates that project management team meeting.
Wow. Amy, I appreciate so very much you bringing this situation to the forefront. Have you tried to talk to John about this, about the holdups? We're all a team here and we're trying to meet our deadlines. So let's do this. Why don't we do this? After this meeting today, because we still have some more things to go over, why don't we take a few moments, but let me know, check your schedule, but directly after this meeting, why don't we try to take about maybe 10 or 15 minutes to go over to see, to define it, and also to see, can we come up with some resolutions, and maybe later on after our meeting, maybe we try to bring John in and tag team and see how we can make this happen.
Okay. Thank you so much. Very good, Amy and Melissa. Everyone, they actually do like each other.
Yes.
Amy, Melissa, and I, we are on the, we work in the Office of Outreach Planning and Compliance, and I think we work pretty well together. So thank you, ladies. So next slide. That's the last slide. It might be. I wanted to hear what your tips and strategies might be if you've managed difficult conversations. The last thing I want to say is something that Sherry shared as far as communicating for our groups, with our groups, speaking, listening, understanding, and then moving to action. Those are the key actions that as facilitators we want to keep in mind that we help our participants to do as well as ourselves. And so that is my presentation. I know it was real quick, but I'd love to hear now your thoughts, your strategies. Yes, and please put them in the chat. So right now, I'm trying not to be nervous because they're silent. But it's giving you guys time to put your thoughts together. So, Carlton, would you read those for me, please?
Yes. So Kelly actually made a good point. A strategy that I do not recommend is ignoring a difficult conversation that needs to be had. Sometimes that's my MO.
Yeah, that's so true, Kelly, because, we may avoid the conversation, we may avoid the people, the difficult people, persons, or, it's not something we don't like conflict in a lot of times, and so we do oftentimes avoid the situation, and then that's when that facilitator is brought in oftentimes. But I agree with you. We have to address the situation.
There is another comment from Sherry. What if the meetings continue to get heated? Have you ever asked people to step away and take a break, cool off?
Yeah, thank you, Sherry. I have. Sometimes we'll take a break, and it gives us all time to regroup, get our thoughts together, and as a facilitator, I'm thinking about, all right, what do I need to do to get the group back together and to get them unstuck? We've got this barrier, or something was said. How do I lower the emotions in the room? And then I start asking those questions. What? Oftentimes I've said, I'm stuck. Based on what just happened, what do you all think we should do? How do you all think we should move forward? Or what do I need to do to help us all get back on track? What are your thoughts? I have other questions I have a list of questions that I take with me when it goes off track. And sometimes one of my ground moves is I knock 3 times. When I knock 3 times, everyone understands, okay, we stop. Everybody just stop, and let's just take a break. Or not only will I knock 3 times, sometimes I have my little Elmo. I didn't bring them with me today, but I bring Elmo with me as well. And Elmo is everyone, let's move on. But we have to we give people time to, consider what just happened, reflect on it, be open if it's something they want to share about it in a respectful manner. Let's do that. And again, we're here for a particular issue or whatever, but we want a positive outcome. So how do let's come together and talk through this situation, and we've got to address it. So how do we move forward?
Thank you for that.
And I'm open to other suggestions because I know you all have great comments, great suggestions.
We have another question, Ramona. What do you recommend when everyone in a group is making one person a scapegoat? How does the facilitator keep the heat low and offer some protection?
Yeah, we want to redirect that conversation and redirect the focus, not the individual, not the person, but the issue. And also not the person, but the actual behavior. We want to address the behavior. And that's one thing that I like to do is, okay, so not focus on why is so-and-so doing this or put that person on the spot, but we have a challenge with this particular this particular behavior, and how do we address it? How do we stop that behavior or change it, improve it? So I like to focus. That's one strategy I use, to take the focus off of the individual. But I like to hear what some of you guys do.
Amanda also noted she likes the idea of putting responsibility for de-escalating back on the group.
Yeah, and kind of call them out, so to speak. Go back to what they determined in the ground rules.
There was another statement here by Jill. Another bad strategy is assuming that just because there is no overt conflict, there is no problem. Sometimes you don't have the right people in the room. Sometimes there isn't enough trust between people in the room to raise concerns.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment very much, so, and that's so true. And that's kind of where you're pre-planning and you try to talk to your executive director or your team leader or supervisor to kind of give you some more insight as to who is in the room, who do you think who should be there, and make sure you're working with that team leaders to encourage everyone to participate. And you want to find out, well, what impact is this issue having on your individuals, having on staff, having on the organization, having on your project? And, you know, you want to try to get as much information as you can to, you know, help the folks who are in the room, and then reach out, follow up, and reach out to those who may not have come, may not have participated or felt they needed or wanted to show up. Be open and welcoming to everyone, you know, in the organization.
Ramona, there's another question here in the chat by Ken Vance. What is the best method to bring someone back into the conversation that has left the room, hung up, or has stopped communicating, in parentheses, electronically?
Yeah, you know, I'm going to throw that back out to some of you who participated, who are facilitators. One of the things is when I start off, I do like to have all participants on the meeting on camera if they're able to. Understanding some people have broadband issues and so forth, but I think one of my ground rules is to have participants, you know, have their cameras on. But you know, I want to ask the group, what do you think we should do? And yes, Ms. Melissa.
I don't want to, this is your presentation, Ramona.
Yeah,
First, I want to say, everyone, this is the guru. She is the expert. She is extraordinaire. And yes, she is an introvert. Don't take her silence as not knowing, because she has a wealth of information. And I am always in awe of her. So, Miss Ramona, I bow humbly before you.
Hey, Melissa.
Second,
Thank
she
you.
don't take compliments
Thank you.
well. She does not take compliments well.
I appreciate that. But yeah.
This is an interesting situation that that was asked.
Yeah.
So what we have to remember when we are in a workshop and people are coming in from different walks of life, just like you do, you may have had that situation where you're the kids are acting up, the dogs don't want to go out when you take them up, you're trying to get there on time, you're rushing, getting in, a car act up, somebody has ticked you off for the day. And I have to come in and facilitate. So it's like, okay, I must do this here, center myself, and come in and say, greetings, everyone. Are we ready for a good day? Well, everybody is not able to make that transition and change. So when you have a group of people and they're coming in, you don't know what they have dealt with for the day. And they may or may not be in the space to participate. There's different gang of personalities in the room, right? So as a facilitator, you have to keep that in mind. So if a person acts out, because that's what it is, they're acting out, walk out of the room, then first of all, as Ramona said, you try to de-escalate it, but there is a way. If they walk out, let them cool off.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they come back in, do not draw attention to the person. That can also cause a person to become even more aggravated. So let them sit down, let them cool out. And I have seen it when it happened in a session that I was in. And when we took a break, when the person came back in, okay, we said, well, we're going to take maybe like a 10-minute break. I've seen exceptionally where one or two people have gone to that person and, you know, well, how can we help in this situation? We heard you. And then later on, after they come back in the break, it may be an opportunity that that person will apologize, and then they can further explain, well, this is what the situation is. They may not talk about what's going on with them personally, but also the situation could be they're so passionate about it and they're only describing in their context what is happening. So there are little different things that you have to try to do, but never, I would say never draw attention to the person.
I agree. I agree. Thank you, Ms. Melissa. And I saw a comment about Amy as well.
Yeah, I just noted that if you have someone who's kind of been hanging back, maybe not because they're angry or upset, but they're just not as engaged in the process, or they're maybe more introverted. One thing that I like to do as a facilitator is have some kind of written reflective exercise and give people a few minutes to think and write down what their answers or thoughts may be, and then go around and have everybody talk about what they were thinking about. And that brings in people who maybe are more reflective and need some more time to think before they want to speak to the group, or who sort of need to be put on the spot a little bit in order to bring them into the conversation.
Yeah. Thank you, Amy. Yeah, and it's great for us all to hear what each other's thinking, what ideas are and thoughts, and we make it a safe place for them to feel that they can share. Yeah, I appreciate that. Any other thoughts?
Yes, Ramona, there were a few other thoughts, various thoughts about folks who were reflecting back on meetings with their grantees and things getting a little bit more heated and storming out of the room, about building trust early on in a project, and the time it takes to develop that trust, and even having to change consultants. A good amount of activity in the comments. Amanda or Cher, I'm not sure. I know it is 11:55. Did we have time for one or two more reviews of comments, or would it be time to transition?
I think we can take a few more comments or questions and then wrap up a few minutes after 12.
Awesome. Elizabeth had pointed out that she, like we were saying earlier, that she had a project where it took a year to develop trust and it required a change in consultants.
Mm-hmm. And that might happen. Yeah. I think one of the things I like to do is, again, I kind of read up on the organization. I like to find out what, is it anything in the news about them, or I try to establish a good rapport with the executive director or another individual in the representative of the organization. And I really try to come to know the participants. If I'm there, if I'm asked back a couple times, really want to get to understand them better. And I always, and I know you've heard me say this before, but I'm a big believer in the DISC assessment, and because I think it helps people understand their own behaviors, and when they understand their own individual behaviors, and understand what we do, why we do what we do, and it helps us identify the behaviors in other people and how to respond to those individuals, how to communicate more effectively with other people on my team, other people in the organization, and they understand one another. So this is just one strategy, one tool I use to get a better understanding of people with whom I may be facilitating meetings with. Thank you, Amy.
Amanda also made a point to that about that the trust issue could go back to people having a voice earlier in the project. There are also another comment from Jessica about a quote: "Anger is an emotion. Anger isn't an emotion. It is a response to emotion." And just noting that when her sister said that to it helped her think through different situations. And Amy also mentioned the DISC assessment which you have also given a presentation on.
Well, I thank you, and thank you, Jessica, for sharing that thought. Anger isn't an emotion; it's a response to an emotion. And and it's natural as well. It's a natural response oftentimes with, and there's nothing wrong with it. We just need to understand, like what you're sharing with us. It's a response to an emotion, and we have to be cognizant of how we respond, particularly when we're in meetings and so forth, as facilitators. Recognize that response and how we'll respond to it. Tell me if you have any examples of a meeting you facilitated and things got off the rails, but how did your group take the lead in getting themselves back on track? Has anyone ever had that experience? The group took control and they worked through the situation, and by the end of the meeting, they were all working together and communicating. Those lines of communication came open again. They left the meeting laughing and talking with one another again. Has anyone have an experience like that they may want to share? Because then with a community meeting, they can be heated. One thing
I have one. Oh,
yeah. Yes, Jessica, thank you.
it's not from my life as a CD specialist or even working with the state. It's from when I worked at a hospital in conjunction with a court. And we actually worked for hospice and had to facilitate death or end of life conversations. And when you have a large group of people having like kind of like a not great day, obviously, because someone they love is dying, things tend to get off the rails a little bit quickly, especially when you have such time constraints, which doctors and nurses have. So they might say things in the abbreviated version, which don't get received that well. And I learned very quickly that it's really important to have the right people in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very important to kind of recognize like who has the power in this situation. Or I was always told to find the thermostat who's going to set the temperature in the room. And I've had conversations where it like almost came to blows. And it was always the least person I expected who would always bring it back, and they would always say something that connected back to the mission or the purpose of being there, and they would connect it to the individual. And when they said that, it kind of got everyone back on the right track, and it got focused on like the objective.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. You need those people. In the meeting, in your discussion to help bring things, help lower the emotions and get us all focused back on the matter at hand. Why we're here, why we're in the meeting, and it's not about not about me as a facilitator. So it's not about you. It's about the other people and what are their needs during this meeting. So I appreciate you sharing that, Jeff.
Ramona, it looks like we have come to our time. Thank you so much for that amazing presentation, and thank you so much to the participants for all of that engagement. I think we had a very fruitful conversation.
Thank you. Thank you all. I appreciate it. Thank you, Carlton, Amy, Melissa,